In the meantime, Jonathan who? The White House downplaying Jonathan Gruber's role in developing the health care law, but try telling that to Jonathan Gruber.
I was only in one meeting with President Obama during this process, and he had a bunch of us in his office to talk about how to control healthcare costs. And I got the call the day before, I was driving back to the beach with my kids, and I got the call, President Obama wants to meet you. I'm very excited to hang up. I say, hey kids, President Obama wants to meet with me. They said, it's great. My daughter says, well, is it just you or is it like a group of people? I said, it's a group of people. She said, oh, that's not that impressive.
I don't know if I told you, but I'm kind of a big deal. Anyway, not everyone was laughing. By our count, the Obamacare architect who called American voters stupid may have visited the White House no fewer than 19 times. And it is not just the White House that wants to forget this guy.
I don't know who he is. He didn't help write our bill. And so, with all due respect to your question, you have a person who wasn't writing our bill commenting on what was going on when we were writing the bill. Let's put him aside.
Wait a minute. Nancy Pelosi, didn't you say this?
Our bill brings down rates. I don't know if you have seen Jonathan Gruber of MIT's analysis.
You mentioned Jonathan Gruber. All right, so much for Jonathan Hill. Let's just say all of this is making Sabrina Schaefer a little sick. She's executive director of the Independent Women's Forum. So all of a sudden it's Jonathan who, but obviously they know who Jonathan was.
Right, and now Nancy Pelosi and the White House are running away from Gruber the way, Democratic candidates ran away from the White House just a few weeks ago for the midterms. It's kind of funny. But look, no, this is really serious. I think this may have a different effect than previous problems that we've seen, right? We've had lots of problems along the way with Obamacare, from the rollout to, you can keep your insurance if you like it. But this has a different tone because now we're not talking about policy, now we're talking about the American people.
Here's what I agree with you, this should get a great deal of play because it should concern you what was going into their thinking, was being crafted. The major mainstream newscasts, they're just not covering this. They're just not that into it.
Right.
Now, I'll give them every benefit of the doubt. They say it's really, mind-numbingly boring, et cetera, et cetera. Somehow they didn't feel that way about Mitt Romney's remarks in 47. Right. That wasn't mind-numbingly boring. But they're not giving this the play I think it deserves. And that's not speaking for the right or left. It's just a news story. It's a good news story that one of the key architects was saying this stuff. So if that's the case, then what?
Well, first of all, I think there's going to be increased pressure because of networks like Fox News that are covering it, and people are saying, "Hey, we need to hear what's going on
here."
Because
we're kind of a big deal.
Because you are kind of a big deal, the leading cable network, and I think it's important that people start hearing this. And one of the big things is that, look, Republicans have a real interest in getting this word out. It has been hard to get more support to repeal Obamacare, and one of the reasons I think is because people have heard the same messages repeated over and over again. It's going to decrease quality of care. It's going to cost you more. It doesn't have an impact anymore. But when something like this comes out, it actually can really disrupt people's thinking. It can really change the game.
But Sabrina, you mentioned something I think is very, very important, and that is this idea that even when it was being constructed, and I mean you and I were talking about it, that if it sounded too good to be true, it probably was. And I even said at the time we were living practically, I should have gotten a condo in Washington when we were covering
I know, right.
And when they said, you can cover everybody, you can cover pre-existing conditions, all laudatory goals,
sure.
And then say you're not going to pay more for it. Well, again, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I do crunch some numbers around here, and I would know and said it is going to cost more. So this is confirming those original suspicions I think a lot of Americans had.
That's right. And I think that there's been a big confusion. I had this on social media today, an argument over this, the difference between health coverage and health care, right? We all want to make sure that those in our nation who don't have coverage get that, but we're more interested in making sure that everybody has quality care that they can afford. And that's where market-based solutions are going to be much more impactful than more government.
One thing Gruber said that I think doesn't get as much press, but I think it's quite revealing when he talked about Cadillac plans that really weren't so Cadillac. These plans that are considered extra generous that only the rich folks have. But it was sort of like the AMT, the alternative minimum tax, that it would presumably be targeted only the wealthy, when, as you and I know, it grew to include a much wider base of people. And that was the same thing with the Cadillac tax. And he is speaking offhandedly to these groups. The Treasury is going to get a lot of revenue off of this because it is going to encompass a wider group of people.
And this is the conversation we never had, right, Neil? I mean, this is what Valerie Jarrett and others at the White House are saying. Oh, we had this great conversation, this debate.
Only the rich will pay.
Right, and this is totally fabricated. The fact is there was no debate. It was my way or the highway with this president. There was massive disapproval of this law before it went into effect, and they basically shoved it down the American people's throats. And now Gruber's out there saying, guess what? We did just that. And people are saying, hey, hold on, I don't like that.
Very well put. Sabrina, thank you very much. And the only reason we're bringing this up, folks, and while you might not see it covered in some of the mainstream press, this is how this was cooked up. This is how these numbers were agreed to. And it raises an important point about key mathematical sort of estimates that were deliberately kept vague so people would know. And then it gets back to the issue of what, Nancy Pelosi knew and whether she knew exactly what was in it, whether she remembered Mr. Gruber or not.